parents during public hearings that video games lead to violence.
I wrote a blog post a while ago about why I hate video games.
Cold-blooded murder is making Mortal Kombat the most popular video game in history.
There are people in their 20s, 30s, 40s that are now playing video games. That's how they spend their life. I mean, it's so childish, it's so juvenile.
Video games have always been scrutinized by the mainstream media for being, at best, an immature waste of time. And since the early 90s, when graphics became realistic enough to involve actual violence, the critics have brought forth far more consequential accusations.
Violent video games have encouraged the killing of innocent people for sport.
The logical arguments against these skeptics started as establishing video games as an art form, and every console generation has a few games that proved a strong counterpoint against the cries of degenerate. When Exhibit A was Mortal Kombat, Exhibit B and C were Mario and Sonic. Family-friendly, beautiful franchises made with integrity and sprite work that, if printed on a canvas, no one could deny would be a piece of art. As video games evolved into more complex entities, so did the arguments for and against them. The naysayers cried that, specifically the first-person shooter video games, serve no purpose but to glorify violence. But that's simply not true. This particular genre existed and still exists today for the purpose of creating very tight, intense, skill-based gameplay that leads to athletic levels of competition. Very, very few players, when they're playing well, are thinking, yes, I just killed that person. I believe the majority are thinking, yes, I was better than him. I was faster than her. There isn't a genuine intent of violence. Now, video games, including games in this genre, are far from perfect, just like how there are books and movies that glorify violence or other vices. But in the instance of those other two, no one is arguing that books or movies that merely contain vices automatically promote those vices. Movies and books are allowed to contain these vices to tell a human story because humans are full of vice. But people are quick to critique the exact same content if it's present in a video game, and that's not fair to the medium. Remember when I said every console generation has its few masterpieces that stood as a strong beacon for gaming as a whole, especially in the face of anti-gaming criticism? From the 6th generation onward, I think about half of these icons are first-person shooters. And I think that's really impressive since this was and is the genre most targeted by negative criticism. So as oversaturated as the market may be today with these types of games, you have to respect the reason they have such a strong presence in the gaming community. More than most genres, first-person shooters really encourage teamwork if you want to be successful. The Halo franchise is a perfect example of this. The original Halo was arguably the best game of its console generation, and I believe Halo 3 and Halo Reach are some of the top dogs the following generation. These games have strong single-player modes, but the real draw is the multiplayer. And anyone who has played Halo multiplayer knows they're better off if they can communicate with their teammates and attack the enemy working together as opposed to just kind of running around and looking for somebody. The other top dog in this genre for the 6th and 7th console generation was Call of Duty, and these games didn't have as large an emphasis on teamwork, but these games were not only insanely fun, brilliantly made, and massively successful, they showed anyone paying attention that the games themselves were not about the violence. It's about the competition, it's about the intensity, it's about the community, it's about having your friends over and eating a pizza and playing Capture the Flag until 3 o'clock in the morning. It's about Blizzard coming out with a Skin for Mercy and donating all proceeds to fund breast cancer research. Your next question might be then, why do these games have to be so violent? If my optimistic outlook is accurate, is there proof of financial success and tight competitive shooter mechanics in a less gritty game? If that's what it's all about, have those games evolved from what they were into success for a first-person shooter game in a less controversial atmosphere? Yes. For the few of you that don't know and haven't guessed, Overwatch is a team-based first-person shooter released by Blizzard in May of 2016. The development of Overwatch began when Blizzard developers and executives decided to scrap a game they were working on called Titan. There are multiple factors as to why they decided to do this, as there are with any major company decision, but the main reason they made this call is because they said the game just wasn't fun, and I can understand how it went down that way. Blizzard has a name for making huge, vast, and oftentimes complicated games. I can see how much of the development of StarCraft involves balancing dozens upon dozens of items and mechanics, and a similar focus on technicalities must be necessary to maintain Hearthstone, and that's not a bad thing. Blizzard has a strong fan base that expects this level of attention to detail from their games. I'm not saying their attention to detail is a bad thing at all. What I am saying is I can picture a group of people becoming so focused on the balancing and the tiny mechanical details that they lose focus on the big picture of, is the game fun? The development of Overwatch began with this recommitment to making sure the game is fun first before worrying about the details, and it shows in the best way possible. Overwatch maintains Blizzard's attention to detail and glitch-free gameplay, and the game is just really fun. The only comparable game I can think of in recent memory that demonstrated a similar refocus on fun is Super Mario Odyssey, and you have to understand that is not a comparison I make lightly. Some games give you some variety by letting you pick as maybe 4 or 5 different classes or characters. Overwatch has 30 different characters, all with different weapons and abilities, and 21 maps, with 4 game modes in just the main rotation alone. Don't even get me started on the arcade modes like Total Mayhem and Capture the Flag. The reason you don't usually see this much variety in a game like this is because it's incredibly difficult to balance that many characters. This is the same reason why Smash Ultimate is so impressive with its massive balanced roster. But like I said, while Blizzard refocused the core of the game on fun, they did not neglect their signature work ethic and attention to detail, and they are constantly working on the game to further balance these already very competitive characters. You know, I think the reason I love this game so much comes down to 2 things. And the first one is the matchmaking. I've played games where it takes forever to find a game, and the algorithm sucks at making balanced teams. But that is not the case with Overwatch. Overwatch gets you into a game quickly, and I can't even count how many games end in overtime, with both teams inches away from victory, only for one to fight harder and pull through in the end. The second thing is the game gives you a lot of opportunity for what I call gaming's magic moments. Like if you're playing Call of Duty, the coolest thing you could get was a kill streak. Maybe you could get like 2 dudes with 1 sniper round if you're a boss. Halo was a little cooler. You could pull off something awesome like shooting a guy out of his own vehicle when he's about to run you over, or the classic. Now Overwatch though, you can be launched into the corner as McCree and line up a quadruple kill with your quick draw, or you can zip up to a roof as Widowmaker and snipe McCree in the face as he's activating his quick draw, thwarting his attack. You can sneak behind someone as Lucio and push him off the map. You can obliterate the enemy's objective with Hanzo's charging dragons. It's almost impossible to play Overwatch and not have a magic moment like this. And honestly, this is the most rewarding part of the game for me. But there's so much more I could say about this game. They have seasonal events that are actually fun and different. They even have their own game modes. They have a loot box system that actually makes sense. They have an endorsement system that actually works at discouraging toxic behavior. But if there's one last good thing I can say about Overwatch, it's that I think it's the strongest argument today against the idea that video games are all about the violence. Because here's the thing, Call of Duty can be Call of Duty all day, and it's going to be Call of Duty all day. And I can stand up here and promise you that the reason gamers are gonna get that new Modern Warfare game is not because it has white phosphorus. But I will never be able to actually prove that because the game does have white phosphorus, among other very violent, gory elements. I could stand here all day and point at Nintendo and indie games and say, look, it's not about the violence. But I still won't be able to really prove my point because they can say, yeah, but Nintendo isn't making shooters. It's the shooters we have an issue with. Now, Overwatch, this is evidence we can use. The game is rated T for teen, not M for mature, like every Halo and Call of Duty made for the 7th console generation. Overwatch maintains a T rating as a shooting game with guns because the emphasis is not on the violence. You don't see blood and gore lining the battlefield because the developers deemed these elements unnecessary. And Overwatch isn't some tiny thing that sits off to the side and doesn't count. It has its own esports league. It's probably one of the best-selling video games of all time. All this to say, it's successful. Like I said in the beginning of this video, if I'm right, if everyone defending video games for the last 30 years is right, if it's about the type mechanics and the gameplay of the first-person shooter genre, then there should be a commercially successful evolution of the genre that emphasizes mechanics and fun and de-emphasizes violence. And Overwatch is exactly that. And at the end of the day, I don't think there's a higher compliment I can give to a video game. 5 out of 5.